I think it's time we reintroduce ourselves to this man called Jonah. But at the same time, there's a lot of history we need to get back in there and learn about what people today are saying about Jonah. So you go to Matthew in the New Testament here, not the Old Testament, but the New Testament, chapter 12, verse 40 through 41, it says, "For just as Jonah," Jesus is speaking here, okay? This is the Son of God here. It says, "For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The men of Nineveh will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, for they repented at the preaching of Jonah. And behold, something greater than Jonah is here." We're going to go and cover the other verses before that in just a few minutes. But he's talking about here, Jesus is talking about himself. And many times people have an issue about the story of Jonah. They think it's a myth. They think it's just a fable. They just want to make it up. But Jesus himself says this is true. This is a fact. So I want to talk about Jonah. And before we get into chapter 1, I want to go back over as far as a little outline. Jonah is a very practical book that we can learn a whole lot from. Many times we don't want to study about Jonah because it steps on our toes too much. Many times we hear the things about Jonah and you'll find out they're not true. Like Adam and Eve. They ate a what kind of fruit? Come on, go tell everybody. Apple? It don't say. It don't say. It just says fruit. Exactly right. But we like to talk about apple. So if we can start changing that fruit to apple, then we can change a great fish to a, thank you, a whale of a story. And that's what people do. But if I could change that here and change that there, then guess what? What keeps me from changing other things? You see the damage? You see the line you're going down? But that's what we're talking about Jonah here. Now, go back to verse 38, and it says, "For some of the scribes and Pharisees," oh, who are the scribes and the Pharisees here? Are those the bums and hobos out there on the street, aren't they? The illiterates, huh? Just the opposite. These scribes and the Pharisees, scribes are the ones that scribble, they wrote, they're the Xeroxes of the day. They're the copy machine of the day. They would literally have to write, every little dot, tittle, and jittle, and all this stuff. They had to write it all out if you wanted it. They would write it out, so they had to know what they was writing. That's what I'm getting at. The Pharisees, that was part of the Jewish group. That was another section of them. And the Pharisees were the religious people. They was the ones that was supposed to be the spiritual leaders of the Jews, supposedly. So they was looking, the scribes and the Pharisees was answering to Jesus as, "Teacher, we wish to see a sign from you." Jesus, show me some of this little sleight of hand magic stuff that you do. Show me some of this stuff, Jesus. I want to see that. But Jesus answered them and says, "The evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign." When he says evil, we get that because they're full of themselves. They don't have no care about God, don't have no care about good. It's all about me. And so they say, "Jesus, show me a sign so I can condemn you. I can call you blasphemy. I can do all these other things, take you to court and get rid of you." That's what they're trying to do. Now, when he says adulterous, you got to understand, we talked a little bit about this as far as in Bible class, where Jesus is the bridegroom. He's the groom. The church is the bride. Okay, you see the marriage relationship between Jesus and the church. And so when the bride goes out off somewhere else for another man, another god in this case, another idol, you see where it'd be adulterous. And that's what he's talking about. In other words, Jesus says, you are supposed to be my bride. And now you're going after an idol. You're going after self. You're going after something else. And he says that's what the problem is here. So that's why you're adulterous. And back then, they didn't use that word lightly. You know what happens if people were caught in adultery back then? If they could kind of somewhat prove it, you're stoned. You're dead. You didn't do it again. That was it. You're gone. And so that's why back then it carried a lot more weight than it does today. And so an evil, adulterous generation seeks for a sign. He said, "You scribes, you Pharisees," he don't come out and call them that. But if they was halfway smart, they would realize he's talking directly to you guys. And he says, "You seek for a sign, but no sign will be given to you, except the sign of the prophet Jonah." Jesus in the New Testament is talking about Jonah because it's fact. He's saying, hey, it is a fact. And it says, verse 40, For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man. When he dies on the cross, Jesus died on the cross, what happened? He was entombed for 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. And so he's making that correlation between the prophet Jonah and Jesus is what he's doing here. And so Jesus has spoken this as a fact here. He's talking about here as the last part, the men of Nineveh. We're going to get a little bit more of this, because if you don't know a little bit of history, you don't know a little bit about the situation, you're like, boy, Jonah was a pretty well a foolish old man. You know, what's going on with you, dude? Come on, get with it. But no, Jonah turned around and he said, but Jesus, remember here about the men of Nineveh. We're going to talk about the Ninevites here too. You need to know who they are. This don't make sense. And that's why Jonah didn't like it either. And just like we'll address that issue, the men of Nineveh will rise up at judgment with this generation and condemn it. Why they're going to condemn this generation of the scribes and Pharisees? That's your people who write the laws and writes the books, you know, copies the books and all. And that's the main religious people of the Jewish nation, the Pharisees. And the men of Nineveh, remember this. When you come back, you'll shake your head like, boy, he is condemning those scribes and those Pharisees. He's throwing the wall, the book, the kitchen sink. He's throwing everything at them. They don't even know what he's saying to them. He says, these people are going to rise up and condemn you. For they repented at the preaching of Jonah. And behold, something greater than Jonah. These evil people of Nineveh, the Ninevites, they repented. Now, somebody that's greater than Jonah. I wonder who he's talking about there is here. He says, the Son of Man. Jesus is here, and you don't even know it. So Jesus is confirming that the story of Jonah is fact. They've really got 4 chapters in the book of Jonah. Each chapter really deals with a different phase as far as Jonah's life here, as it makes a progression. We go through these phases too if we don't watch it. We will sometimes digress, we will progress, we'll jump around, but we need to be watching as far as what Jonah and see where I am in my spiritual life like Jonah. Chapter 1, he's running from God. Chapter 2, he is running to God. And then chapter 3, he is running, this is where we all need to be. He's running with God. And then, look at me. I've got this now. I'm number 4. I'm going to run ahead of God. Oh, I tell you, Psalm 46, verse 10, be still and know that I'm God. Wait up on the Lord. Jonah didn't understand that part, so he went through all different stages from, to, and with, and then ahead of God. We do the same thing sometimes. So chapter 1 talks about this here in verse 1 through 3. Now the word of who? The Lord came to Jonah, the son of Ammonite, saying, arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me. But Jonah rose to flee to Tarsus from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarsus. So he paid the fare and went down into it to go with them to Tarsus, away from the presence of the Lord. Tell me this, how far can you go, or how long does it take for you to get out of sight of the Lord? Has anybody figured that? Well, I can go to the space station. God's not there, is he? What if I go to Mars? What if I go to the lowest parts of the ocean? So what in the world is Jonah thinking he's going to leave the presence of the Lord? Do we ever think that sometimes about ourselves when we kind of don't want to listen to the Lord? See, God, I'm gone. And we don't get out of his presence, but we out of sight, out of mind. I'll ignore you, God, and so I don't see you. And that's like a kid's game, you know. They cover up, you don't see me, you don't see me. You know, it's like, yeah, I do. You don't see me, but I see you. And that's what Jonah's doing. He's playing that game where, God, you don't see me. And God says, yes, I do. I know exactly what you're doing. But so why would somebody ever want to flee from the presence of God? I mean, he's a prophet of God, and he's got this great relationship with God. Now all of a sudden God tells him to do something so simple. Just go to the people, tell them your evils, repent and change. But why would somebody do it? Go to chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. But it displeased Jonah. He was not happy at all. Why? Because he was displeased exceedingly. and was angry. And he prayed to God and said, "Oh Lord, is not this what I said when I was yet in my country? That is why I made haste to flee to Tarsus. For I knew that you was a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and relenting from disasters." I knew that's what you are. That's your characteristics, God. Verse 3 says, "Now therefore, O Lord, please take my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live." What is going on with this story here? The Ninevites, the people who lived in Nineveh, they was, if you know a little bit about history, about wars, about conquering countries, they was the Assyrians. We talked about it before. The Assyrians were bitter, hated, just can't stand to even hear the name, enemies of Israel. Not only that, they was very, very cruel when they would go conquer somebody. They would not necessarily go out and kill everybody. They would take a whole lot of them as captives, take them back to their prisons, and then they would torture them in front of an audience. They would cut their heads off and keep their heads as souvenirs. They would go out there and watch them get tore up with lions and all kind of beasts and stuff. They'd go out there and just have amusement out of them, killing them right in front of you, slow death and painful death. That's the way the Assyrians were. Now, how many volunteers do we have to go to Assyria? How many volunteers we got to go to Nineveh? And what are you going to do? You're going to tell them they're wrong? God, wait a minute. These are my enemies. I hate them. You know how brutal they are. You know how much they torture and kill people. And yet you want me to go and tell them they're wrong? Why don't you take me out and kill me, God? I mean, that's what they're going to do. Oh, no. And so when you look at the Assyrians, how ruthless they are. But Jonah said, "You know what, God? If they did change and listen to me, they repent, what are you going to do? You're going to forgive them. You're going to have mercy on them. And I don't want that. Because they need to die. They need to pay the price. They need to suffer for what they've done. But you're a merciful God." And so that's why in chapter 4, he's so mad at God. And so much anger. And so that's why he says, but that's who the Ninevites were. And then verse 4 and 6. But he went out on this boat. He goes out sailing. Oh, boy, he's made it in the shade there. He's, gone to sleep. But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest, just a constant roaring and, whipping up the wind and the waves on the sea, so that the ship threatened to break up. That's pretty bad. Those ships wasn't the best of ships like we have today. But it was so bad that ship was about to sink. So what does the people do? What does the crew do? It says, then the mariners were afraid, and they cried out to his God. Each one to their God. They're crying out now to their little idols and their gods and all. And then they started doing what any mariner would do. You lighten the ship up. You try to get more freeboard. You get rid of your cargo, so they tossed the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten it for them. But Jonah had gone down where? To inner parts. Somebody else did that, didn't they? Remember Jesus on the boat there fishing? He went to sleep. And then the winds and the waves come up, and he said, "Peace, be still." This is what Jonah's doing. The same thing here. But Jonah, he had gone down into the inner part of the ship and had lain down, and he was fast asleep. Oh, I bet when he finally got a little bit of rocky motion with the ship, he finally realized, "Boy, I can sleep now. I'm done with that God. I'm not going to Nineveh." And so he laid down and fell asleep. And so the captain came and said to him, "What do you mean, you sleeper? Arise, call out to your God. Perhaps your God will give a thought to us, that we may not perish." Right now, we're all going to die. We're going to be sunken in the ship out here in the middle of nowhere, and you're going to turn around and sleep? All hands on deck. Let's get busy. Oh, I tell you. And then verse 7 through 12. And then they said to one another, "Come, let us," when all else fails, nobody, God's not listening, or their little idols not listening to them. "Oh, let's just go cast the lots in this, let's just get rid of somebody. Maybe found the right one." And so they turned around and cast lots, and guess where they fell? And then they want to cast lots so they'll know on account of this evil who came upon us, why it came upon us. And so they cast lots, and it fell naturally on Jonah. Lucky guy. And then they said to him, tell us on whose account this evil has come upon us. Why is this going on? What happened? What did you do? What is your occupation? Where do you come from? What is it your country? Where you come from? What is your country? What are the people you're from? Where, who are you from? What's your background? What is going on here? Verse 9, he said to them, I am a Hebrew. Boy, he's been up front honest with them. I mean, he's kind of like caught, so might as well fess up. He says, I am a Hebrew. And Hebrews back then, they carried some weight, not just a Jew, but I'm a Hebrew. And I fear the Lord, the God of heavens, who made the sea and the dry land. Then the men they were exceedingly afraid, and they said to him, what? What is it that you have done? Why have you done this? What'd you do? It's so evil that you will kill us all. They already knew that he was fleeting, as it says there. Why? Because he told them. In verse 11, they said to him, what shall we do with you? I don't know about you, Jonah, you're the problem. You admitted you're the problem. And I'm about ready to die because you're the problem. I'm getting rid of you. I'm going to throw you. I don't care what you say. But they didn't do that. They turned and says, what shall we do with you? That the sea may quiet down. For who? Quiet down, not for you. I'm thinking about myself. I need this thing quiet down for me. And the sea grew and more tempestuous. And then he said to them, pick me up and hurl me into. He didn't say, you know what, I'm going to be up front and bold with you. I'm just going to jump over the side and be done. No, he said, y'all pick me up and you toss me in that water. He said, I don't know how to swim. I don't know if he knows how to swim. I have no life jacket on back then. And so I got a problem here. So no, just pick me up, throw me overboard. And that way you separate yourself from me, and God said, okay, fine. You're not part of my complimentary, entourage here. You're separate. And so y'all are getting rid of me, and maybe he'll take that as a kindness to you and not kill y'all. So they picked him up, verse 12, and they hurled him into the sea, and then the sea will quieten down, is what he tells them. For I know it is because of me that this great tempest has come upon you. 13, 14. Nevertheless, the men rowed hard. They said, no, we don't want to throw you out because you're going to die. And so we get that. You're the problem. You admitted it. Okay, fine. We're not going to do that. So they rowed hard and harder back to dry land, but they could not. For the sea grew more and more tempestuous. Who are they fighting at this point? Just some wind, some storm? They're fighting God. Oh, that's another lesson all in itself. When we start fighting against God, when God tells us to do something, or God says this is the way you need to do things, but no, I'm going to do it my way. And then we keep wondering, why are we so difficult to get through this? Why is it so difficult? Because you're fighting against God. Those fighting against God. Was there any hope of them ever rowing back to dry land if God said no? Not at all. And so in verse 14, therefore they called out to the Lord, Oh Lord, let us not perish for this man's life. About me, God. Save me. You do what you want to him. I don't care, but, we're going to throw him overseas, protect us. And God, let us not perish for this guy. And then guess what? Lay not on us innocent blood for you, O Lord. Have done as it pleased you. Have done as it pleased you. He said, hey, don't hold this against us, God. We're doing something to save our necks, our skin. And so they picked up Jonah in verse 15 and hurled him into the sea. And the sea ceased from its raging. Normally when you have a storm, the winds die down, the storm passes. It takes a while for that waves to calm down. It takes a while for everything to get back kind of a status quo, equilibrium. It takes a while for that to happen, but what happens? It shows you the hand of God is there. The sea ceased from its raging, like day and night. Then the men feared the Lord exceedingly. Well, that will get my attention. You throw this guy over, and now all of a sudden you better die. Now you're like, wait a minute, it's okay. And they feared the Lord exceedingly, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows. And the Lord appointed. Didn't say he created a fish. He didn't magically make one. He appointed. He turned around and made a fish. Some people take this as far as a special little house or something. Well, it's kind of like a submarine. But he turned around and made that fish to be able to occupy and take care of Jonah. And he appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. Now what can we learn? Jonah, I'm sorry, but he did not like what Jesus said to him. He didn't like it at all. He didn't like the word of the Lord. He said, no, I don't like that. So guess what? I'm going to do something what I want. Many people today don't like what God says to us today. So what do? We just ignore God. We leave them. Non-church members, they don't like to hear about what? Baptism, the church. They don't like to hear those things. What about members? Sometimes we don't like to hear about our responsibilities and our shortcomings. We don't like to hear about because why? I'm good. I'm perfect. I don't need all that. But no, when we look at our lives into the perfect law of liberty, we find out that we are not measuring up. So we got to do something. We got to change. And that's called that repentance. Oh no, yes, that's what we need to do. 2 Timothy 4:3-4. For the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching. The time has already come and gone, in my opinion. But having itching ears, they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions. Oh, is that what we have today? Oh, well, you want this, you want that? Well, fine, I'll tell you what you want to hear. Just pay me the money. And verse 4, and they will turn away from listening to the truth. The truth will set you free. The truth is the word of God. They will turn away from that and wander off into myths. How true it is. Could I be like Jonah in chapter 1? God tells us to do things in his word. I don't really want to do it, God. Bye. I'm going to ignore you. I'm going to leave. I'm going to try to run hide. That's what Jonah's doing. And where did he end up? In the belly of a great fish. And that was not too pleasant there, but God protected his life and spared his life. That was his life raft. That was his protection there. And next week, Lord willing, we'll find out about where all this goes with Jonah next. But Jonah is running from God. Do we run from God when we don't like what he tells us? And where does that get us? A heap of trouble. And God said, hey, you need to come without delay. You need to hear, oh, hear the calling. You need to hear what? Now for thee. And that's what he's telling us. We need to be waking up. We need to listen to God. When he tells us to do something, we need to do it. I don't care if we like it or not. God didn't say, Jonah, I don't know you don't like it. I don't care. Trust in me. I won't leave you. I never will forsake you. And so what we need to do today is make sure we are right with God. When he tells us to do something, then we need to make the right decision.